Dr. John.
Thank you.
I'm going to teach you what you're doing wrong with dating. And
How to do it right.
And how to be careful with from the chicks.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi. First of all,
From the chicks.
it's an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I'll do whatever I can to help you. It's very interesting. To tell you a little bit of my background, my grandparents, my great-grandfather was born in Syria, and they get on a boat to Buenos Aires, and they'll go to Yerushalayim first, and then they get on a boat to Buenos Aires, and there was 3 boys and 3 girls. One of them is my grandfather, and he decides to go to do business in Cairo, Egypt, and he gets married over there. He brings the wife back to Buenos Aires, and she missed her parents. She was homesick, and she decided to pull him to go back to Cairo, Egypt, where I was born. And but I have many, many cousins in Buenos Aires right now, Baruch Hashem. So a little story about my life. So I was born in Cairo, Egypt. My father obviously was Sephardic. My mother was Ashkenaz from Ukraine. After the communists took over in Russia, many Jews ran away. And if you look at the geography on the globe, it's a straight line down to North Africa. So that's where my grandfather, who was named Saraweski, decided to go to Cairo. And when we got to Cairo, Baruch Hashem, thank God we had a nice life. We lived in Cairo in the winter, and we lived in Alexandria in the summer. It's a summer town. It's a beautiful town. And then until the 6-Day War came. The 6-Day War came, and my father was arrested as a Jew. All Jews were arrested by Nasser because they committed the crime of being born Jewish. We're feeling it today with what's going on since October 7th, but I felt it there. I was 6 years old, walking around in the streets, watching Molotov cocktails being thrown into shuls and smashing windows, seeing them burning, etc. All the Jews were arrested, actually, because he wanted revenge. Nasser, who was the dictator at the time, was very upset that the IDF destroyed his air force in a matter of an hour. Gone. So he wanted revenge, and he was going to execute all the Jews. The New York Times picked up the story, and the New York Times decided to publish the story that Nasser was going to execute all the Jews. This is in 1967, and a rabbi from Brooklyn, a rabbi named Rabbi Kamenovitz, who was the dean of the Mirror Yeshiva. There's a Mirror Yeshiva in Yerushalayim, and there's one in Brooklyn. These are huge centers of learning. And he calls up, and he calls the State Department, and he goes, "Do you realize they're going to be executing all the Jews? What are you doing about it?" And who answers the phone? A young man at the time by the name of Nathan Lewin. If you know anything about lawyers, he's the guy who got Lou Rashkin out of jail. Shlomo Rashkin is one of my dear friends today. The guy that was in jail that was pardoned by Trump. Anyway, he comes up with a brilliant idea. He says, "I have a great idea, Rabbi. I have a word with the president or the dictator of Spain. His name is Franco. I'm going to call him up and ask him if he would do us a favor and get the Jews out. How? I'll ask him to give passports to all the Jews." And so he issued Spanish passports. All my life, I asked my mother, "Where is these Spanish passports from?" I never knew until I lived in Miami Beach for 7 years. One day, it's the 40th anniversary of the 6-Day War, and the newspaper comes from New York, and it says it's the 40th anniversary. We're going to talk about the Spanish Angel of Mercy, and Baruch Hashem. And then we end up in New York, and then from New York, I take an interest in this work, but beyond that, I was a sports medicine physician. I had a very critical role at the Olympic Games in 1984 in orthopedics and sports medicine. But I always had a fascination in this area, dating and helping young people. And I had 2 very, very important people in my life that influenced me in a very big way. When I was 12 years old, I became very close to a man called Ravigdon Miller. And when I was 20 years old, I became extremely close to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Very. And both influenced me, and both played a very critical role in the selection of my wife. And so I made it my life's mission to take an interest in this and try to help people date and date successfully. And last year, I was chosen to be on Netflix. I'm a dating coach on there in episode number 6. Yeah, and it went very well. Actually, by the way, I have a podcast with Eliza on Sunday, so we'll see where that goes. But she and I are close friends. I deal with people, and today my second career is talking to people throughout the world that are dating. 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old, 70 years old. I've been involved. I facilitated over 1,200 shidduchim, made 50 of my own.
Wow.
So I deal with a lot of stuff, and I see a lot of stuff.
Wow.
So I'm going to show you today what's going on in the world of dating. And I'm going to try to give you my advice and my counsel to try to get you to the finish line as quickly as possible. So here we go. What you see here is 3 typed pages from a guy, you see this? 3 typed pages from the Upper East Side, from a 53-year-old man. This is what he wants in a woman. This is why he's still single. And if you went through this list, you say to guys, what's he smoking? Right? 100% Jewish, spiritual, believes in God, good chemistry, magnetic smile, feminine figure, good height, slender and fit, great eyes, long hair, well manicured, nice figure again, he told me already, self-confidence, full of humor, joyful and delightful, has a good value system, sincere, realistic. It just goes on. Passionate, has role models, work ethic, good vocabulary. Okay, she needs to get an A in English. Trustworthy, knows what's to be happy, great karma, very friendly. You get it? This is why a guy like this is still single. Because of what we call unrealistic expectations. Let me read you a poem. Her nose is too long, her lips are too wide. I couldn't possibly take that girl for a bride. She jabbers out questions, she laughs too loud. She isn't that smart, she blends in with the crowd. What's that you say, I should give the girl a chance? Okay, if you say so, I won't trust my first glance. Well, what do you know? Am I surprised? She has so many pluses that was somehow disguised. Her laugh sounds so charming, her questions so clear, her brightness was hidden, her modesty sincere. I'm so happy with my wonderful wife, who is the brightest part of my life. Give the person a chance. How about a joke? Girls, I don't mean it. I know next year I have to come back and give you the wife store, but welcome to the husband store. A new store has opened, a husband store. There's a sign at the entrance. You can visit the store only once. There are 6 floors. And the value of the products is more expensive as you go up, greater value. The shopper can choose any item from the floor, or you can go up, keep going up, but you can't go back down. You either have to keep going up and make a purchase, or you exit once you've made a purchase. So a woman goes into the store. On the first floor, there's a sign. It says, welcome to the husband store. Here we sell men who have good jobs. Sounds good. She's intrigued. But she says, I want more. Just don't want a good job. So she continues. Let's see what they sell on the second floor. So she goes up to the second floor where there's a sign that greets her. Welcome to floor number 2. Here we offer men who have good jobs and love kids. She's intrigued now. She says, you know what? It seems to be getting better. Let me try the third floor. So she gets up to floor number 3 where there's a sign that says, here we have men who have good jobs, love kids, and are extremely handsome. Wow, she thinks. I don't think I need more than this, but you know that it's Sahara, the guy, the demon with the 4 progs. So let's go to 4. Let's see what floor 4 has to offer. So she goes up there and there's a sign that says, here we offer men who have good jobs, love kids, are extremely good looking, and help with the housework. She says, boy, it can't get better than this. But then a voice inside of her says, oh, maybe it could. So let's go up to floor number 5. She goes up to floor number 5. There she's greeted with a sign that says, here we have men who have good jobs, love kids, extremely good looking, have equally help with the housework, and have a great sense of humor. She says, now I found what I'm looking for. A guy that has it all. Or so she thinks. But she's intrigued. Let me try the 6th floor. It keeps getting better. So she goes to floor number 6. Where there's a sign that greets her. It says, my dear lady, welcome to floor number 6. You're a visitor, 42,200,000. There are no men on this floor. This floor only exists to prove that women are impossible to please. Thank you for shopping at the husband store. And that could stand, it could go for men, it could go for women. And we have a problem today, unrealistic expectations. And we need a strategy. We need a strategy. It's very important. So, a little bit of a joke. 3 men, Giovanni the Italian, Isaac the Jew, and Joe the Polak, are sentenced to 20 years in prison. The prison warden asks them, you can take one thing into the prison with you. One thing. What would you like? So Giovanni the Italian says, I want a wife. And the prison warden says, granted. Isaac the Jew says, I'd like a cell phone with a charger. And the prison warden says, granted. Joel the Polak says, I'd like a case of cigarettes. And the prison warden says, granted. The cells are locked. After 20 years, they're opened. Giovanni the Italian comes out with his wife and 12 bambinos. Thank you so much, Mr. Warden. I'm so happy. I have a great wife and 12 bambinos. Isaac the Jew comes out and says, Mr. Warden, I'm so grateful to you. With the cell phone and charger you gave me, I called all my friends on Wall Street and I made trades with the money I had in the bank. I'm a multimillionaire. I can't thank you enough. And he hugs the warden and he leaves. Now he opens the cell to the Polak and he says, come on out. Polish guy looks at him and he says, can you spare a match? Get it?
Lighter. Nobody's smoking.
Right. A lighter. Can you spare a lighter? I mean, he never did anything with the case of cigarettes because he didn't have a lighter. Thank you for that. So we need a strategy. And believe it or not, the Torah gives us that strategy. A young man in Muncie, New York, is about to get married. 3 weeks before his wedding, he develops an unsightly dermatological condition on his face. His mother says, there's no way we're going to send you to the chuppah this way. We got to get the best doctor on this. She does her due diligence on Google, looks at reviews, and finds the top guy in the Upper East Side. He makes an appointment, and he's waiting. He's like, call him like an innocent guy, a yeshiva boy. And he's waiting in the waiting room. There's a prominent people when suddenly a punk rock star walks in. Yellow hair, pink hair, and then the whole 9 yards. Everyone's saying, oh, did you see who walked in the room? Did you see who walked in? And they're all elbowing each other when they finally ask him, look who's here. And he has no clue who she is. And word gets back to the doctor about this greenhorn Jew in the waiting room who doesn't know who this big rock star is. Finally, it's his turn to be seen and to be examined by the doctor. So he says, I heard your mother sent you here. I heard you're getting married. He says, yeah. He says, one of those matches that are pre-made? No, we went out a few times, but 10 dates, it was good. People believe in God, you Orthodox Jews, you know nothing about life. He says, you know what? I want to give you some advice. The young kid wasn't that stupid. He says, doctor, unfortunately he was a Jew, wasn't religious. He says, before you give me any advice, can you just tell me, how many times were you married? He says, 5. He says, you have nothing to teach me. And the point he said to him, our Torah gives us direct guidance, how to do it and how to do it right. So what's going on? Why does it seem to be so difficult to get married today? What's happening? Okay. First, you have to understand something. How do you date? Do you date with your heart or do you date with your head? And Dr. Abraham Tversky was a brilliant man who published 86 books. He says, we date with our heads. As a matter of fact, I'm a physician. I went to NYU and Harvard. And I remember having a discussion with a lawyer 3 months ago on healthcare. He was doing some work for me, etc. He's in Buffalo. And he says to me, I had to fly in for a hearing in Manhattan, and he flew in, and he goes, it's time to go back to JFK to fly back on JetBlue to Buffalo. He gets to JetBlue's terminal, and he said, there's a delay. Why don't you head off to the TW Hotel? They have a nice bar there. Have a drink or two. We'll call you when the plane is ready to go. So he tells me, he says, I walk in. He's totally not a religious guy, not connected to Judaism whatsoever. He says to me, I walked in, and there's about 100 Orthodox couples dating. It's a hot spot for dating. So he calls me up and goes, Dr. Jack, hey, what's up with all that? So I said to him, you know what's going on over there? Those are people dating the right way. What's going on? They're asking questions. They're asking good questions. They want to know, am I compatible with you? Do we have common vision? Do we have common goals? Where are you headed in life? What's your family like? What do you want from life? What are your dreams? What are your goals? Where do you want to travel? What makes you tick? Do you have problems with anger? How's your patience? They're digging. You're going to spend the rest of your life with this person. How unfortunate it is that I deal with so many young couples today that are divorced 6 months in, 5 months in, a year in. I was telling one of the boys, Josh, I had a marital counseling session with a couple on Sunday night on Zoom. Thank you, he says to me. I'm happy we decided to do it Sunday. We haven't spoken in 5 days. And thank God, I got them to talk again. You understand? And we're working on it. But without the tools today, you can make serious mistakes. So again, realize that proper dating is done with the head. And that means you create what we call the top 10 list. What do you want in life? What's critically important? Not in terms of superficiality, wealthy, father has an apartment in Miami Beach, will take me away to Sukkot in Yerushalayim. No, we're talking about midos, character traits. Especially for a girl, her list has to have 3 musts in a guy. Check out his kaas, kaptan, and kamtsan. Is he angry? Is he cheap? And is it my way or the highway? That's 3 non-negotiables that I told my daughters to look out for when they got married. It's very important, and something I tell the girls all the time. Check those 3 areas out. Because if the guy suffers from any of those 3, that's living with hell. You don't want that. And another thing, is he or she spiritually growing? Here's another one. Simchat Chaim. Joie de vivre. Is the person happy? Okay. Yeah. Is the person happy? Do you want to live with someone who's depressed? That's terrible. That's a sentence of death. Check out emotional problems. Do you see any sign of Asperger's? Do you see any sign of, on the spectrum, OCD? These things can add up in life. Initially, you're living in a bubble. You're dating in a bubble. But if you're not checking for these things carefully, once you live under the same umbrella, you have problems. You've got to learn how to check for these things.
It's very hard to find those stuff, cover up well. People that have those, issues.
There are people, unfortunately, who end up being casualties. You're right.
They don't even know about it sometimes,
That's pretty rough. Really?
What?
Yeah. I mean, there's signs and signals you can tell.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Borderline, let's say, I don't know, bipolar, all those stuff.
When you see mood swings, when you see certain types of behavior, you're on the lookout. You need to see consistency in terms of behavior. When you see erratic behavior, red flag. And you have to keep an eye on that. But I'll be happy to take those questions privately if you want. So again, you need a strategy. And that means that you need to examine yourself and you need to examine your attitude. So I want to tell you a quote. The more you do what you're doing, the more you'll get the same response. Which is, if you don't change your perspective and your modus operandi, why should things look different or be different? So we're going to change that a little tonight. So the first thing we talked about is creating a top 10 list. And you should do that with a third party. I'm going to skip a little bit because I want to get something. If I could find it. Yes, I found it. And we spoke about dating with your head. What you see here is a PDF that I created for one of the biggest podcasts in America called Headlines. It's the biggest Jewish podcast in the world. It's 100 questions that are the most frequently asked questions in dating. You write me a WhatsApp and I'll send it to you. Just send me a WhatsApp to 305-206-1916. That's how you do your investigation. You obviously don't go on an interrogation, but you need to become very, smooth at, hey, what's up, what's doing? You get into a conversation about children, for example. And you ask, well, how do you think you were raised? And how's your relationship with your parents? And would you raise your kids the same way? And by the way, you're a teacher? What's your take on discipline? You could jet from one thing to the next and get a lot of information and collect data. That's critical. Okay? So if you need that PDF, I'm delighted to share it with you. Just send me a WhatsApp or a text, 305-206-1916. I was going to show it to you later, but yeah, again, I'm just taking an example. What's on this list? Why should that help me? It's going to help loads. What are you proud of? Here's a question. Let's say I'm going out with a girl, and it's date 2, date 3. I want to know what makes her tick. What is she proud of? Okay, it's fine. She passed law school bar. Great. She's proud of the fact that she gets along with her mother after not talking to her for 4 years. That's a great thing to see. What does it mean to you to be a Jew today? Maybe it wasn't important 4 years ago, but after October 7th, it's deadly important. What are your goals? I'd like to know that. What does it take to make you happy in life? Here's a girl that I set on a date Sunday, right? Half Ashkenaz, half Sephardic. And I said to her, go out, have a good time. She goes, and they go out, and she says to the boy, listen, just want to put it out there, I'm not much into cooking, and I'm not much into keeping a house. I need a housekeeper. You know what he did? He calls me up Monday morning, see you later, sayonara. And she called me today, and boy, did I let her have it. I said, how do you tell a guy this? How could you possibly tell a guy you don't want to keep a house, and you don't want to cook, and you need a housekeeper? You sent them running for the exit door. What is that all about? But it's very telling. Describe a challenge you had faced in life and how you dealt with it. That's fantastic. I want to know about that. John Gray wrote the famous book Men of the Moon, Women from Venus, writes, there are 3 things that a guy needs to show a woman. What makes a guy attractive to a girl? Confidence. He's confident. Man with a plan. And 3, responsibility. I want to know if the guy's responsible. And does he take responsibility? So if he describes a challenge, in 2020 when COVID hit, my father wasn't able to work. I had to step it up and take care of the family. That's a guy who passed the challenge. That means that when the going gets rough, I can rely on such a person. And that means a lot to me. What are your friends like? And what do you look for in a friend? Ladies and gentlemen, these are questions I want you to ask when you're on dates. We're getting into the person's kishkiz now. We're doing a bit of an x-ray. And we're not dating for 6 months, a year and a half. You can figure it out in 3 dates, 2 dates. If the person that I'm dating right now is someone that has potential to be my partner. Doesn't take a long time if you do it intelligently. How do you settle differences when you're in a disagreement with someone? What do? You just storm out? I did a marriage therapy session last week. A woman just decided not to talk to her husband for 2 weeks. That's not the answer. It's not the answer, right? Who do you admire, etc. So, ask me for this. Okay, let's go. Here's a big problem we have today. Quote, you wouldn't be so concerned about what they really think about you if you realize people don't really think about you. Everyone's worried. I don't know what they're going to say. I flew into LAX to give a lecture in Beverly Hills. And my host was a local rabbi, Persian rabbi, nice guy. He looked like he had seen a ghost. I said, Moshe, what happened? He goes, you don't believe this. I was working on a shidduch, 16 dates, I'm ready to close it. The guy bought the ring. When nonchalantly his first cousin says to him, can I see a picture of the girl? So the boy shows the picture of the girl to his cousin. Ugh, you're going to go out with her? She's so ugly. Shidduch gone. That's it. Because he's worried about what people think about him. Not the fact that he enjoyed her company. Not the fact that they had a great time. They made a great couple. No, he was more worried about what they will say. Okay. When he doesn't, most of the time, it doesn't really happen. Okay. So we need a little bit of a chizik or strength. How do we deal with ups and downs and rejection and stuff like that? There's a yeshiva in New York that produced most of the rabbis that serviced the American community, the American Jewish community in the last 40 years, Chaim Berlin. A very vast place. It's a block long. My younger years I spent time learning there. The rabbi that was the dean there, had sent out most of his students in the 1960s to places like Tennessee, Chicago, LA, Seattle, and he gets a phone call, or rather a letter, from one of his students, who is now into his 5th or 6th year as being a rabbi in an out-of-town community. And he goes, I'm not making it. I had such grand visions when I was in rabbinical college, and now a lot of my aspirations, I don't think I'm meeting the bar of what I should be accomplishing in life. And the rabbi tells him something fascinating. He says, do you think that the perfect people came out of the womb of their mothers perfect like that? The Chafetz Chaim, who wrote the book on Lashon Hara, for example, do you think that he came out of the womb never speaking Lashon Hara? He spoke plenty Lashon Hara. But he worked on himself. He fell and he got up. And he fell and he got up and he fell. And he says, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who was the chief rabbi of the Sephardic world for years, you think he just came out of the womb a genius and a scholar? He worked on himself. And he had his failures. And then he quotes him a verse, a pasuk from Proverbs. It says, Sheva pamim nafal tzaddik v'kam. 7 days did the tzaddik fall, but he got up. He says, no, it's not the way you read it. Sheva pamim nafal. 7 times any person falls, tzaddik v'kam. Just the fact that you get up, you're a tzaddik. Just get up. It's okay. You can have a rejection. And you can have a relationship that goes bust. Don't let it crush you. Get moving. You need organizations like this. You need friends. You need people to help you. I want to show you an interesting experiment that was done. What's going on today? Why are we seeing so many complications in dating? It's called the TMC dilemma. TMC stands for the word too much choice. Barry Schwartz, who's a psychologist, decided to do an experiment. They laid out 2 tables in Whole Foods in Westchester, which is a upscale county in New York City, right? On one table were 6 varieties of jellies. On another one, 30. If you pass by and you taste, you get $1 to buy, $1 coupon to buy. So we have a table that has 6 jellies, and we have a table that has 30. 60% more people tasted at the table that had 30. 30% bought more at the table that had 6. Only 6 people bought from the table that had the 30. What does that tell you? People don't like too much choice. And we have cell phones today. At our disposal, I could literally scroll through 1,000 women in 5 minutes. Or 1,000 men. So what happens? I build up an imaginatory person. In Hebrew it's called a dimyon, a fantasy, of a person that can't possibly exist. I like her face, but this one's figure, and that one's dress, and this one's eyes, and that one's hair. And I'm now stuck in this world of fantasy, of too much choice. Again, because I didn't have a strategy. And the strategy goes back. Had I created a top 10 list of what I'm looking for, then I'm not shaken when that evil guy, the Yetzer Hara, comes to try to shake me and say, she's not good enough. Or he's not good enough. AI, big today, right? Let's say what AI has to say about dating. We have a professor from Canada with 85 associates. They're going to do a study on 12,000 heterosexual couples. Okay? We're going to study to see if AI can figure out who your partner for life should be. So they looked at demographics, physical appearance, sexual tastes, mental and physical health, and much more. And they asked people, what do you want? Same basic stuff. Someone tall, someone rich, all the wrong reasons. Preferably in a profession, lawyer, accountant, doctor, sexy name. And to their incredible displeasure, they spent $6 million on the study. AI could not give any kind of indication or any predictable value of who they could tell you would be your husband or your wife. But they did come up with 3 conclusions. Let's hear them. John, were you satisfied with your life before you met Sally? Which is a very Torah concept. Do you have simchat chaim? We spoke about that already. Are you a happy person? Number 2, were you free from depression before you met Sally? Very important. I was telling the rabbi today, I had the pleasure to MC an event in Brooklyn called the Jewish Children's Museum Annual. It's a beautiful building across the street from 770, and they gave out a book to each person called The Hasidic Perspective on Joy by Rabbi Yisrael Majeski. I'm reading it on the beach on this vacation. And he talks about this, how the importance of simcha. Simcha, how important it is to be besimcha. And last, John, did you have a positive effect on other people before you met Sally? We spoke about that before. What you're like with your friends. Do you get along with people? Do you enjoy being around people? That's it. That's all this study was able to find. It's all about you. What are you doing to make you a better person? Are you working on yourself? It's about your communication skills. It's about growing. Let me share an incredible story. I'm going to share 2 stories with you. Paris, 35 years ago. It wasn't the Jewish world as it is today. About 35, 40 years ago, most people were traditional, not as observant as we have today, where more people are taking on, embracing more Jewish values. And there's a girl named Sarah in Paris who tells her father, I'm going to become a CPA, I'm going to go to the Sorbonne in Paris, and I've decided, since my oldest sister married a person who went into learning full-time in a yeshiva, I want the same. So, her father goes to shul, a modern Moroccan guy, really nice guy, you know how it is in Paris, 30, 40 years ago. You go to shul on Shabbat, sometimes even less, kippah comes off, it's not so simple, whatever. So he's in shul one day, and he tells his brother Moisey, Sarah wants to get married. She wants a guy who's in learning. They set up a blind date, and it's going to be at a 5-star hotel in Paris. She's there waiting, dressed beautifully, coiffed, ready to go. And suddenly she's approached by a guy in dungarees and a Grateful Dead t-shirt. And she says, can I help you? She says, yeah, I'm Joe. Joe, there must be some mistake. You're Joe, Joseph, the person I'm supposed to go out with? He says, yeah. He says, boy, you don't even look religious. Oh, I'm so sorry. He goes into his pocket, pulls out a funeral Kapala hair, puts it on. Okay, I'm good. She says, what's my uncle thinking? I want to marry a person, I'm going to be an accountant. Just watch where this story goes. And I want to support him. He asks her very innocently, why would you want to do that? Because that's my dream. I want to be able to support him, and together we're going to build a beautiful home together. And now begins a dialogue, or let's call it a fight, between him and her. And he is 6 months away from an architecture degree in Paris. And after the tete-a-tete for about 45 minutes, she gets up and says, can I go now? And he looks at her and he says, what if I became that guy? Nah, not in a million years could it ever happen. Okay, they part ways. And then, 3 weeks later, her father gets a phone call from his brother. What'd you do to him? He just dropped out of college, university, where he was going to become an architect, and he wants to go to yeshiva now. And he wants a second date with her. And she says yes. And he agreed, but this time no Grateful Dead t-shirt anymore. Now he's wearing a blue shirt, nice slacks, and having a nice conversation. He's, tells her, I appreciate it, I'm grateful to you. You opened up a new world to me. After the date, they had coffee. He says to her, can I have another date with you? She says, I don't know. Baal Tshuva. Maybe not for me. And she opts out. mistake. So the years go on. She's no longer 21, she's 24, she's 27, she's 28. And our friend Joseph decided to go to New York to study. From there, he made Aliyah to Israel. At 32, word gets back to Paris that he's now dean of a school with 250 students. And she's thinking, did I make a mistake in my life? A year later, unfortunately, horrible news comes in. There was a terrorist attack in Israel, and his wife and 5 of his children were killed. And he's going to come back now to pay Shiva call, or to people should greet him because his family is in Paris. And our heroine is 37 years old. And everyone's telling her, he's coming back. What do you say? Maybe you want to have a date with him? I don't know. It'd be so uncomfortable. And she says yes. And they meet in the same hotel. And she's waiting, and in walks a regal man. Looks like he's the dean of her school, of yeshiva. He walks in, prominent. You know what a Hamburg hat is? That's a hat that's reserved only for the top rabbi. And he has such royalty to him. They sit down, he said, how are you? What's doing? 17 years, we haven't seen each other. And he says to her, you don't know how grateful I am to you. You made me who I am. My wife used to go to the kotel all the time to daven for you. You should get married. I'm so grateful. And then she starts to cry. And she says, you had mercy on me and I never had mercy on you. Ladies and gentlemen, 10 dates later, they're engaged. And on the day of the wedding, he gives her a souvenir gift. The first kippah that he ever wore, that he had in his back pocket. And he stuck it in their photo album. It's learning to see beyond. It's looking for the potential in an individual. Not just getting lost in the darkness of the physicality. And that's important, by the way. I'm not going to dismiss. There's got to be physical attraction. There must be. And that's important. But let's not run crazy with that. Let me just read you something from John Gray. Physical chemistry alone is short-lived. This is a non-Jew, right? A man can be turned on by a seductive woman who promises gratification without any strings. I was amazed when I was a counselor in Hollywood for the stars. And I discovered a similar pattern. Women who were stars and models, extremely attractive, would share the same complaint. Every woman coming to talk to me and vent to me. Their husbands were not attracted to them. I was dumbfounded. What's going on here? I couldn't imagine any available man not being attracted to these women, but it was true. And then I did my homework. I researched it, I studied it, and I came to the conclusion. These women had been pursued by men who were primarily sexually attracted to them, but never got to know them. Do you see the connection, ladies and gentlemen, about how to date cerebrally versus just physically? People were just feeling sexual chemistry. That's it. Both partners were responsible. And it wasn't just the man, the women were also culprits. People were putting too much emphasis on the physical aspect of the relationship and never created the opportunity to get to know each other. And then he says, here are my conclusions. When physical chemistry is not backed up by chemistry in the mind, chemistry in the heart, chemistry in the soul, it doesn't make it. It's short-lived. Once the pleasures and passions of the body are experienced, without the corresponding passions of the mind and of the heart and the soul, it just goes away. You want any evidence? Go to Publix, stand to pay for your food, and just look at the latest National Enquirer 90-day marriage in Hollywood. They're a dime a dozen, right? He's a star, she's a starlet. It means absolutely nothing to us. Nothing. Can a person change? You can't change the other person. You can only change yourself and your reactions to that person. That's key. So if you're anticipating changing someone, that's not your problem. Don't marry someone's potential. What you see is what you get. Very important. In Hebrew we say, Lo ma she'haya v'lo ma she'yeh. Not what was and not what it is. Oh, but they come from a great family. But the guy has been arrested 3 times for selling drugs. Or whatever. You're not marrying the family. You're marrying the person. So pay attention to that. I'm going to give you a little brief blurb on that. The divorce rate today is 65%. We're going to look at the 10 most common mistakes that people are making. And in my work, I was just telling one of the guys here, years ago, I was busy helping 22-year-olds meet 24-year-olds, 25-year-olds. All I deal with today is almost all divorced people. The more lectures I give on dating, the more divorce I see. So I decided to do a study. What's creating it? What's causing it? Let me just give you 10 reasons that are... Let's hear about the mistakes so that we don't do them. Make sense? Yeah. Number 1, I just told you, you picked the wrong person to marry because you expected that person to change after you're married. Number 2, you picked the wrong person because you focus more on physical attraction than on character. While physical chemistry lights the fire, it doesn't keep it going. Number 3, this is for the guys, girls to look in the guys. You picked the wrong person because the man doesn't understand that a woman needs quality time and attention. If you're going out with a guy who's busy on his phone most of the time, you're not his most important priority. Number 4, you picked the wrong person because you don't share common life goals. Again, we spoke about this. Make sure that when you're single, figure out what you're living for. And then find someone who's come to the same conclusions as you. A famous French philosopher said, love is not 2 people staring at each other. Love is 2 people looking out in the same direction. That's what you need to look at. Am I looking in the same direction as you? Number 5, you choose the wrong person because you get physical too quickly. It's not necessary to take a test drive in order to determine if you're compatible. If you do your homework and ask the right questions, you can determine very clearly if you're compatible. And here's the beauty. Of all the studies done on divorce, problems in the bedroom is never cited as the main reason why people divorce. Almost never. Number 6, you picked the wrong person because you didn't develop a deeper emotional connection. I see this a lot when I question people as to what happened in the marriage when they come in and they're freshly divorced or whatever. And I'm shocked. They spent a year dating, 2 years dating, but never really got to know each other. 7, you picked the wrong person because you choose someone with whom you don't feel emotionally safe. I had a woman from Wichita, Kansas, that I helped. She wasn't that religious. She started with Chabad in Wichita, Kansas, and then I learned with her on the phone once a week. And she was like a Baal Tshuva, thank God, nice lady, 50s. I set her up with a guy in Houston. They got married. She said to me that her second husband almost killed her to death, physically. So you have to be careful. If you don't feel emotionally safe with the person, or they're trying to dominate you. Let me tell you a very important line. There's a very big difference between controlling and making suggestions. A suggestion is made for your benefit by the person you're dating. A controlling statement is made for their benefit because they want to control you. So look out for that. 8, you picked the wrong person because you don't put everything on the table. Is there something bothering you about this relationship? You got to talk about it. You got to bring it up to the person you're dating. Whatever's bothering you about the relationship must be brought up for discussion. Bringing up the uncomfortable stuff is the only way to evaluate, can you negotiate and compromise? I love it personally when people come to me in relationships and there's a little bit of a fly in the ointment. I want to see how you work it out. Because if you can figure it out now and compromise and come to a mutual satisfying compromise, I know you'll live well together. So if there's something that's annoying you in the relationship, talk it out. Number 9, you use marriage to escape your personal problems or lack of happiness. I got a little bit of a shocker for you. If you're not happy and you're not married, you'll be miserable when you do get married. Marriage is not going to fix your problems. Marriage will only make them worse and magnify them. So if there's something going on with you and you need therapy or you need mentoring, take care of it. Number 10, you pick the wrong person because you're involved in a triangle. A triangle is someone that you're dating that has something else going on in their life in addition to you. A porn addiction, too close to the parent, a work addiction, a gambling addiction. I had a girl walk in, married 3 weeks. You ready for this one? After the wedding, they went to the hotel and he's on the phone with his mother for 3 hours. Something's wrong there. And they had to give the gifts back. Done. Okay. So I'm just going to briefly, very important. There is a theory out there that I subscribe to. I'm a very, very big believer of it. As a matter of fact, there's one page that's just here to remind me. There was a cover story. Tu B'Av is the famous day in August that it's considered a great day to get married. It's a week after Tisha B'Av, which is one of the saddest and solemn days of the year. And I happened to be in an interview with Rabbi Manis Friedman. He was a famous Chabad influencer, a great guy. And he talked about a concept that I believe in very strongly for many years. What to look for in a guy and a girl. And essentially, to break it down, in Hebrew, and I'll explain it to you, the man should be the mashpia, and the woman is the mekabel. The man is the giver, and the woman is the receiver. And when we have relationships that are built like that, where the man is the giver, and the woman is the receiver, those are the best relationships. Because that's the way it was meant to be. Now, I'm often asked the question, how do I know? What formula can you share with me that I know if I'm going out or miss the right or miss right? So I'm going to teach you a formula that I'm a very, very big believer of. It's called the PAIR formula. P-A-I-R. What does it stand for? P, physical attraction. It doesn't have to be bells and stars. It could take sometimes 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 dates to get there. But there's got to be physical attraction. That's P. A, admiration. You need to admire the person that you're going out with. Some character, some quality of their character. You know, you look up to them. You know, I admire him because he helps communally. He gives tzedakah. She's such a great cook. She helps and volunteers at the local nursing home. He helps his parents, whatever it may be. There's something admirable about him. He's such a hard worker. He runs a great company. There's something, you have to admire something in that person. Also, A, acceptance. No one's perfect. Can you accept them for something that they have? A medical condition, an upbringing that was rough, an adolescence that was troubled. But since then, they were able to rehabilitate themselves. No one's perfect. And that's A. I, emotional intimacy. Can you be private with the person? Can you share your innermost thoughts and feelings with the person? Do you do subtle things for them? You buy him his favorite chocolate. You pick her up from the subway or the airport. Can you share freely? And R, respect. There's no place in a Jewish relationship where there's a lack of respect. I don't have to say much about that, but if there's any kind of behavior that violates that, that's a problem. Again, here. There's a great book that I read once, Gentile, great guy, but I feel like this is where people get in trouble a lot. Ego is the enemy. Our egos get in the way, and we have to be very careful. We sometimes can have a great person right in front of us, if not for the ego. Let me share a beautiful story with you. In Israel, when they have a wedding, they bring out a cake. And on the cake, they'll put sparklers. Sometimes the sparkler doesn't light up. So the maitre d' has a little lighter fuel bottle in the back of his pants. He just gives a few squirts, and he gets the cake to light up. It happened to have been the yortzeit of Rachel Imenu. And many people went. And in Israel, not everyone has a car. So a couple of guys were tramping. Tramping is the word in Israel for hitching a lift. And these guys get into a car that stops. And in the back, they're talking about how it's so hard, making the month. The economy, their financial status is very tight. And the driver is listening. And he's hearing their story. And he says, where's your emunah? Where's your faith in God? That He can help at any time. So he says, I'm going to tell you a story. And he told them the story about how his father worked for the National Broadcasting Service in Israel. Secular Jew, no connection whatsoever. And he needed extra money to take care of the family. So at night he moonlighted as a maitre d' in a wedding hall. And that night he brings out the wedding cake. And it's not lighting up. And then he takes his trusty lighter fuel and he gives a couple of squirts. And the cake goes on fire. And there's a couple of young girls, about 9 years old, playing near the cake. One goes running right into the cake, and she becomes a ball of fire. Everyone's paralyzed. The photographer had common sense, must have been a former IDF officer, and he runs to the nearest table. He quickly grabs the tablecloth, and he pulls it right off. China goes flying everywhere. He wraps the girl in the tablecloth. He's able to douse her, but not until the damage is done. She has third-degree burns all over her body. They call Magin David Edom, which is the 911 in Israel, and he decides to hop on the Magin David Edom. He says, my father doesn't. My father, he says, is a former IDF officer, and he's crying like a baby in the ambulance, blaming himself. And the parents are there with the girl. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. She happened to have run into it. And they get there to the hospital. They lose track. The father had a let's call it a critical, deep think with himself, and he says to himself, maybe it's time that I discover my roots. And that begins the process of the father slowly but surely becoming religious. The years go on, and the driver's telling them, I was, drafted into the IDF, I come out, I need a job. So I decided that I'm going to take a job. There's a guy who has 50 candy stores in Israel. And it's called Metukim Zeshilana. Treats are us, right? And I got a job, and he gave me a job working for him in one of his stores, and he says to him, he was, the owner happened to have been observant. And he says, I understand. His name is Sharon. Sharon says, he tells the young boy, Sharon, you know what? That girl who works the cash register, he decides, why don't I make a shidduch? You're running my store. She's running the cash register. She's a nice girl. Her name is Yamit. Why don't you guys go out? She's also not like you. She's secular, not observant. And they went out and had a good time. A few months go by, and he's into her. And he wants to now take it forward to the next level. And he's getting ready to consider proposing to her. And he says to her one day, he says, I don't understand something. I know you're not observant, but how come you dress like you come from Bnei Brak? Like very religious. What's that all about? She always wore long shirts and long skirts. And she says to him, listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. When I was 9 years old, I was involved in an accident in a wedding hall. I have third-degree burns all over my body, and I have scabs all over. And that's why I have to cover up. The guy turns white as a ghost. And he says, was it Sassim V'Simcha Hall in Jerusalem? He says, yeah. She says, I don't know if you ever want to speak to me ever again. My father was the maitre d' that night. And he goes, I don't know. Will you ever want to face me? And she says, no. She starts to cry. It must have been meant. Hashem wanted us to meet. God wanted us to meet. You want to meet my father? It's been like 16 years. Sure. They go back and the father cries like a baby. And they both decided that since something like that was so statistically impossible to happen, that maybe that was a sign from heaven. And they both themselves, through Chabad, begin the process of coming back to, or becoming close to Judaism. And he get married, and he tells them the story. And we were a poor bunch. My wife and I, we had jobs. We couldn't afford an apartment, so we lived by my wife's mother. After a year, I felt so bad. I said to my wife, it's not fair. We're taking advantage of your parents. We should look for an apartment. He says, you have to hear what my wife tells me. Have you ever heard of King George Street in Jerusalem? It's probably one of the most prominent and exclusive streets. Well, after the fire and the whole episode, my wife's parents sued. There was a lawsuit against the facility, against the wedding hall. There was a 5 million shekel payout. And they bought my wife a penthouse, waiting for her to one day get married. And it was waiting for us. And we moved right into it. 4-bedroom penthouse. Emunah! There's a God in the world. And why it's important to have Him in our life. And He gave those 2 guys in the back seat a real lesson. That if we're working on ourselves like AI told us, if it's about me, if I'm growing spiritually, if I'm growing in my dating technique and my outlook on life, it's all part of it. Search for a friend, someone you can talk to, someone you can confide in, someone who listens, someone who understands you, someone who values your opinion, and someone you admire. That's very important. You're going to live with that person your whole life. Keep in mind. I could go on and on, but I think I gave you a very, very nice, brief summary of little bits and pieces. Anyone out there who needs my help in any way in dating coaching, you can go to my website. You can, sign up for a consultation if you want, drjackdating.com. You can write me a WhatsApp. I'd be happy to help you. I do everything. I try to match people up too, but most importantly, I try to guide people to help them focus on what's right and what's important. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It was an honor and a pleasure.